Similarly, how we can destructure arrays, we can also destructure objects. So we have the object of Bob, then the first property, the last one, the city, the sibling, and of course we have these values. We have Bob, Sanders, Chicago, and let's imagine that the sister name is Jane. And if we would want to access them again, we would need to create variables first, then we need to say Bob and then whatever property name, and then we would assign them. And of course, in the console log, we would be able to access them all, but it is time consuming and is a bit annoying since we keep on repeating Bob, Bob, Bob. And again, imagine that you would have a longer property. Let's imagine that you would have some kind of object and then property that is an object itself, and then another object within that property. That's typical answer where you're getting from the API. So it's not far fetched where you would essentially need to keep on repeating, okay, get me the object, then the property, then another property, and then you can only get the value. So why don't we try destructuring? And again, just so you don't think that I'm cheating, I'm just gonna comment this out and we're gonna take a look at how we can do that. And unlike arrays, when we destructure the object, instead of the brackets, we're looking for the curly brace. So again, for the arrays, you would do something like this. Const, and then you have these square brackets, because that is the syntax for the arrays. But if you would want to destructure the object, then we need to use the curly brace. And then we're looking for the properties. So what properties are in Bob object? Well, first we're going to assign it to a Bob object. And then we're going to say, okay, we would want to get a first. That is going to get me the string of Bob. Then also we could get last. Then let's look for the city. And let's just see what we're going to have in a console. Let's console log it. First, last, as well as city, and we should have 3 values. We have Bob, Sanders, as well as the city is Chicago. Okay, but we need to make sure that the property is there. Notice how the name was exactly the same as the property name. So unlike arrays where we can come up willy-nilly with whatever name we would want, in this case, property name needs to match because we're destructuring the actual property. So if I would try to access a zip property, which is not, of course, on my object, and if we're going to console log it, we're going to see that is undefined because, of course, there is no zip property. So if I'm trying to destructure it from the Bob object, well, I'm going to get back undefined. And your next question probably is, okay, well, it has a first property, but what if I don't like the name? What if I don't want to use this particular variable name? Or what if I'm using it already somewhere in my project, so it's not like I can just use another const? Well, what we can do is we can use the alias. So we have the first, then we add a colon, and then we just add whatever name we would want. So in my case, if I would want to have a first name, well, I just set it equal to the first name. And in this case, if I'm trying to console log the first, I cannot do that anymore. Why? Because the now name is first name, not first. So in this case, if I would want to access it, then of course I'm looking for the first name. And also let's take a look at how we can destructure even more when we have a property that is object itself. And the way it works is right after zip, just because I would want you to have the reference that we're going to get undefined, I'm going to look for sibling. Since sibling is an object itself, then we have a colon, and then we're looking for the property within that object. So in this case, that would be sister. If you don't like the name, let's say that you would want a favorite sibling, you can just say sister. So now you're accessing the property. Then again, the same thing, colon, just like we added with a first name. And then you can come up with whatever name you would want. So in my case, I'm going to go with favorite sibling. And now, of course, when I'm accessing that property, I need to reference my alias. Not a sister, not a sibling, but a favorite sibling. So within the console log, I'm going to go with favorite sibling. And then, of course, I'm going to have Jane. And I do have the error. And the error is simple because notice how I was accessing the sibling, but the property name is, of course, siblings. So you can clearly see that the property name needs to match to a variable you're going to create. So if you're looking for the siblings and you say, all right, so I would destructure out the sibling, it's not going to work. And now in my console, I have all of them. I have Bob, Sanders, Chicago, as well as the name of the sister, which in my case is Jane. And that's how we can use object destructuring in JavaScript.